Welcome everyone to the Transformation Summit. Together we are wise women rising for embodied change. Today I am super excited. I'm talking with Annemiek van Helsdingen. Now, she is the founder of the Academy for Soul-Based Coaching, and this is coaching which is deeply 100% embedded in the sacred feminine. And this is so relevant for what we're talking about today, because we're talking about, I have to read it because it's a very specific title, Breaking the Paradigm for Soul-Based Regenerative Change. Doesn't that sound fantastic? So welcome, Annemiek.
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much, Alison, for bringing all of this together.
Well, this is going to be such a brilliant topic, and I'm looking forward to just exploring with you where we're going to go with this and open it up for people, because it's, this is so relevant, breaking the paradigm. So let's just dive in straight there, and I'm going to ask you, what is the paradigm that we need to break, and why do we need to break it?
Yeah, thank you. It's such a good question. Let's just start with, well, we all know that our world needs to change, right? But what exactly is it that needs to change? And what is kind of the root of all the injustice that we see? It's like what is the cause that mean that all of these systems that have been, built in the last hundreds of years need to collapse? And when we look at where that is, then we can see that it's a paradigm that's been around for at least 500 years. And so it shaped the world that we know in all ways. It's economically, politically, but also individually and on a global scale. And it's a huge topic that we, but we'll try and be succinct and really make it very practical and translate it into, so where do we see it, and what can we do to be part of that change? And so that paradigm that has been shaped by this magical triangle, well, in between brackets, of capitalism, white supremacy, and colonialism. And it's, if I want to put it into one sentence, it's that paradigm that says we take what we want because we can, regardless of the collective whole and the consequences for all future generations and our planet. And so when we think of where did that start, it really was a bunch of white guys on ships funded by their respective royal families to go and explore, expand the wealth and influence of the realms. And regardless who was there before, right? So eventually up to 84% of our world was dominated by white nations, right? And dominated, exploited, abused. And, it includes many crimes against human rights as we know them now, from, people becoming third-rate citizens, if that, in their own homes, to, of course, the atrocities of slavery, right? And when we look at that European culture, and my ancestors, your ancestors as well, they didn't just rob all of these society, these countries, but we also, our ancestors also thoroughly destroyed the indigenous systems of power and community structures. So really destroying the foundations of what makes a society work. And when we really start to look at it, most of the injustices and find their roots here, because there's no surprise that the richest countries in the world are, by and large, white nations, right? They are former colonizers. There's this law in economics that says, rich people get richer and poor people get poorer. And part of why that is because wealth and money works in a way that once you have it, you can make it work for you. And so the divide over time, over all these hundreds of years, has really grown, right? There's lots more that we can say about this, but as a part of this, what's happened is that also being white meant being in power. So it's white is better, has infiltrated all of our systems. And the bad news really is that even though we're mostly I'm seeing white women, white people are mostly not aware of this, but it's like it's still in the air that we breathe. And we've internalized this, like not just white people have internalized this, but everybody has internalized this to a very large degree. And I even see it in my professional domain of coaching. And so what most of us do every day is kind of like the opposite of regenerative. We extract what we want because we can. And this is even true for, like, I consider myself to be someone who is like aware of this, at least to some degree. I try and make a difference by the way that I spend my money, by the way that I use my time. But still, when we really look down to it, we don't allow our world to regenerate itself, right? It's because we want new clothes, or we need a new face cream, or we want the more exotic food that's not in season right now in the locality that we're living in. You know, we waste and consume, and we throw out like there is no tomorrow as a species. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but I was so shocked when I first heard about this. There's something that's called Earth Overshoot Day. And what it does is it marks the day that, you know, humanity globally, the demand for resources, so ecological resources and services in a given year exceeds what our Earth can generate and regenerate in that year. So it's like we're already using up all of the, you know, food and fuel and water. And last year, that day was on July 29th. So it means that within just a little bit more than half the year, we've already used what our Earth can produce for the whole year. So we're living on a massive overdraft, right? And so, you know, that's how we do it in the way that we're living in the world, but also we do this to ourselves, right? In the capitalist society that we're living in, and we have lived in for like the last 150 years probably, it's like our worth is determined by what we do, by what we produce. And so no wonder that it's so hard to rest, right? Taking a rest while you're not ill, that's like almost like a revolution in itself. And this is where we are extracting from our bodies what our minds are like, oof, that is important. That's what we need to do. So that's the same paradigm, but the way that we're using that within ourselves, right? And then like there's two more. It's like we don't really allow even the beginning of healing of what was broken through colonialism, right? It's like most of our societies are not really interested in supporting social justice. Like on the whole, it's like, yeah, you know, it's like a leftist agenda that, you know, in social media, you'll see like hashtag Black Lives Matter kind of like, you know, rise whenever there's like a new thing that happened, like a new police brutality, another person dead at the hands of police. But it's like, other than that, it's not part of our day to day for most people, you know, that are living their lives. And like the topic of like making reparations for what our ancestors have done throughout the world, like that is not, like that's hard to think of in the privacy of your own mind, let alone let that be of public dialogue, right?
Yeah.
And then the last one is that, you know, when we look at this as a very personal level, because I guess all of this is collective, but also very personal, right? It plays out in all of our lives, whether we want to or not. And one of the ways that it impacts my profession most, like coaching and supporting other people, is that on a very personal level, and mostly subconsciously, even for people who are aware of themselves and have done a lot of work for themselves, is that we firmly place our own views onto the world of what is right or wrong or how things should work, regardless of what other people think, and without an ability to keep connecting meaningfully. And so it's like all of that is like, I'm just trying to kind of paint what that paradigm is about that we need to break out of. And it is really hard because it has been conditioned for over 500 years, right? And it's like, because we're inside of it, it's hard to even start to imagine what's outside of that, right? And that is true for me too. And really, it's only because of the skills and tools that we teach in soul-based coaching and that I've been using for the last 15 years that I've really started to see and experience what happens when we support other people to make those changes that they want to make in a soul-based and regenerative way. So it's a big, big stretch that we're talking about here.
Yeah, it really is. And I loved how you actually, you did capture all of that very succinctly, actually, because it's such a massive thing and it is so ingrained in us. And it is like historical structures, but they have come about through power discourses and assumptions. And I would say, I would also add to your list some religions.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Firmly. Yeah.
And you know, they've become so much part of how we exist that you're so right. We, even when we like to think, oh yeah, I'm aware of that, you know, I'm on top of this, I'm actually doing something about this, we're often not really doing very much because we're still constrained by all of the assumptions that we've grown up in, that we've absorbed, that we've been taught. I mean, if you look at how history is taught, for example, oh my goodness, you know, it's so out of whack. It's just like so unreal that, you know, it's just like crazy. But somehow that sort of holds us in place in a sense of false rootedness as well. And it can be so difficult. And like you say about, you know, we're based in this consumerism. And that's something that I think about on a daily basis, because I cannot get over the global imbalance of, you know, some people having so much food and so much choice. I mean, every morning for breakfast, I have a very, very specific breakfast. Okay. And I can tell myself it's because of my digestive system. Every morning I think, wow, I am super privileged that I have the choice that I can have this, that, and that to come together to make a breakfast that I like and that is good for me. Where, you know, you can just look across the Mediterranean Sea, for example, which isn't very far away, and we can see a completely different experience of life going on there for people because of this total historical, structural, discursive, every which way imbalance in the world. And it's, you're so right, you know, it feels daunting and we need to find ways to actually engage as individuals and as coming together to actually do something about this. So let's look at this from your perspective. Okay, soul-based regenerative change, what does that mean?
Yeah. It's like we're trying to eat an elephant, right? Or like a mammoth, or like, it's like we have to take small bites to start doing this. But it is something that with every, it's like with every breath that we take, we can choose to make different choices, right? And so when I'm talking about the soul-based regenerative change paradigm, there are a couple of things that it stands for and where it starts at. And so the very first thing is that we need to really let it sink in that we are all inherently worthy. And now I know this is something that has been shared across many like new age and spiritual awakening kind of theories and communities. But when we think about this, we are all inherently worthy. It means that all the ways in which we are like struggling with our imposter syndromes, or like all of the ways that we are trapped in the I'm not good enough kind of loops, that we need to really look them in the eye, because they are part of the old paradigm, right? We are inherently worthy. Does that mean we're always good people? No. Like, does it mean that we always show up in ways that is supportive for the whole world? No. But we are all inherently worthy. Right. And in the same line, it is that we are all equal, but we are not the same. we are very much not the same. And that is our rescue, as well as our, our I'm going to say challenge, but it's an invitation to find out about that, right? And so what I've really started to learn through my work is that every human being has incredible wisdom within them, and their body and their soul have access to that wisdom. And also, like, as a side note, when we are able to piece all these pieces together, like the wisdom that you bring, that I bring, that everybody brings, that is where the pieces that we can use to co-create our collective better future with are going to come from. That is where the new structures can be born easily. But we have to let go of this addiction that we have to the mind, right? Our minds do not hold the keys to our better future, but they can be great as servants of that deeper wisdom, right? And then it means that, and this is something this is where I've noticed this paradigm clash inside of my own system so many times over the last 10 years. It is that realizing that our human essence is ever evolving. It is never static, right? So that means that we can trust that there is an expression of like life force energy that moves through each and every one of us. And we can trust that as it unfolds. And it's a little bit like, we all are our own unique, like, rosebud or peony bud. And our life is about, opening. And it's like when you've seen a peony flower, it's like never ending petals, right? It's like so luscious and like it keeps on unfolding. But peonies all look the same, right? Human beings are not. We're all distinctly different as well. And it means that we have to cultivate our capacity to be in that space of unfolding with each other, with ourselves and with each other. And that includes messiness and chaos. It's part of that unfolding process. And it also means, and this is where we're starting to get into that like clash, is that we have to realize that we cannot know how someone or even our own peonies will be evolving. We cannot know it. We can only find out by going through that. And that means that we have to let go of this really deep urge to act from our own kind of knowing about what's going to happen for someone else or what's going to happen for us, and really learn to become truly interested in that uniqueness instead. And that asks for an amount of courage that we've not been trained for by I'm sure actually that most of the people that are watching this have been trained for this, but by life, not by our, schools or even our families. It's a courage to be in the not knowing, to be in the chaos, right? And it's a willingness to stay present, to stay in connection with yourself, but also with the people around you. And it's like living life from the body first, from the heart first, and mind second, instead of the other way around, where we're so busy kind of thinking of like, oh, well, this and then that and then such and then so. No, actually, okay, what's here right now? What is the longing that I feel? What is the, what is the things that are triggering me? How do I want to stay present in all of this? What is it that my deepest knowing tells me about this moment? And then it asks us to be really congruent in our actions, right? Our steps to change, they need to be in alignment with these values, these suppositions. It's like the end does not justify the means, right? If we want to make a change toward a better future together, where all people can bloom into their full becoming, and not just you and me because we like this kind of work, but like every country all across the world, then the things that we do need to be in alignment with where we want to get, right? And of course we will stumble and fall and like bang our heads against the wall, because 500 plus years of conditioning, right? So that's okay. And we just need to remember to, okay, dust ourselves up, get up, try again, and do that in community. Yeah.
Yeah. What I really got when you first started talking was the sense of it being our own individual responsibility to to bring this process or this awareness and the courage and the intent to ourselves. It's our responsibility. So when you were talking about, imposter syndrome and things like this, that so many of us have experienced, and everybody has experienced it, let's be frank. We've all experienced this in the past, especially as women trying to do something different. We've all experienced that. And, it's easy to buy into things like that. It's easy to buy into our doubts as some voice that is perhaps speaking some truth. And really, I feel it's our responsibility to recognize it as part of that larger, domineering paradigm that we're talking about today. And just once we realize that, once we acknowledge that, we can say, oh, then, I don't actually want that, because I'm actually saying no to supporting that paradigm in any way I can. So if I can just say no to thinking, well, I'm not worth it, which really speaks into what you're talking about here, then I can do that, and I can consciously work on reevaluating that I am worthy. And what does that mean? And I loved, you talking about us remaining open and interested, and not assuming that we are, that our values are the same as anybody else's values at all. Everybody makes these assumptions, we all do, it's how we are. And yet there's an opportunity in this moment of just realization that we can say, okay, let's have conversations, because the only way we can find this out is actually by communicating, whether it's conversation or body work. I actually really believe that we can do a lot of communication, non-verbal communication, because I've been watching my animals actually and thinking, cross species, they're all communicating really well, and they don't speak anything like the same language. So I think there's enormous capacity for us as well to do that. So I just really love what you're sharing here. So I'm wondering, are there specific skills that we can focus on developing here to help us in this process?
Yeah, absolutely. As I said before, that the reason I've come to kind of looking at things in this way is because of the work that we do with soul-based coaching. And there's a couple of tools that we use that are very supportive in both learning these processes, to recognize them within ourselves, but also in our work with others, or just with our loved ones, the parts of the communities that we're part of. So I just want to offer you three that everyone can just start to practice, today, because it's not, in a way, it's not hard. And while we're practicing them and really applying them, then we start to get glimpses of what it's like outside of that paradigm, right? And so the first one is about a very core practice of holding space. Now, this is something that for the last couple of years has been going around more and more. And it's not just an empty kind of fashionable word for us in soul-based coaching, right? It's when you learn to hold space for yourself and for others, what it means is that you give them your presence and your loving attention, but without interrupting. So it makes you a witness of that flow, that unfolding, that Shakti, that life force that I was talking about earlier. And when you practice yourself in that, you'll get to see the intelligence and the healing power that lies within each and every one of us. You do not have to do anything to make that happen, not for yourself, not for other people. It's already here if we allow it the space. And this is why one of my gifts for everyone is a short meditation that helps you to hold space for yourself and to really practice that muscle. And if anyone wants to learn more, we have another free workshop that is about the 6 guidelines of holding space, where we really take people deeper into, okay, so what are the things that we're practicing here? And it is a practice. I've practiced this for the last, I need to update my numbers, 13 years. every week with a dear friend, where we just hold space for each other. And I can tell you, besides that, we're doing holding space practice as part of our year-long coach training program. And I still find new layers of where my conditioning is popping up, of where my stuff is happening. And this is a super useful practice that gives so much. It really deepens relationships, as well as that it supports personal processes of healing and change. So that is the first one. So the second one is then to learn to ask better questions. As you said, we need to get into conversations, but the way that we've been taught to ask questions, with our enormous propensity to make assumptions, because yes, a human mind has to make assumptions, otherwise we couldn't possibly process all of the information we get all day long. We would end up in we couldn't function, right? And so what we have to do is learn to ask better questions. When I look at where coaching as a profession comes from, it came from performance coaching, athletes first and then executives. And it was all about how can we extract the most amount of, out of the athlete or the executive and their bodies or their corporations to win, right? And so that is that extraction culture, like beautifully wrapped up in like one thing. Now, coaching modalities have evolved over time, but there are very few modalities that are actually able to not trample all over the client's inner wisdom. Right? Even with the best of intentions, all right? And we see a lot of very experienced coaches and therapists enter our programs, and they are flabbergasted when they learn what is actually possible. And so I could say that like there's a wealth of untapped resources in all of our clients and all of our loved ones, but that in itself is like an expression of extraction culture, right? It's like if only we can tap into these resources and get them to, But if we want to help our clients tap into what's available for them, it's like if we don't, I was thinking of how can we express this? It's like they are like wild horses that are trapped into the My Little Ponies figurines that used to be in my girl's bedroom. It's like that's kind of what experiencing life is can be like at the moment. So when we learn to ask better questions, what we want to do is get those wild horses to become available for our clients so that they can come out and do what they're here to do. And, for some it's wild horses, for others is something completely different. So, it's just as a way of expressing this. So let me give you 2 examples of really great questions that you can always use. And you need to ask them exactly as they are, because there's a purpose to them, right? The first one is, and is there anything else about, and then you put in a word or a short phrase of words that the client has actually used. So if the client's been talking about how they're learning to be, more free in their lives, you're going to just ask, and is there anything else about more free? Right? It doesn't have to be like a full, beautifully crafted, grammatically correct sentence. It's just, and is there anything else about that thing? The alternative here that you can always ask is, and what kind of free is that? Right? Both are invitations to, in the first instance, to go wider and explore, right? For the client to explore what else is relevant about that. And the second one is to become more specific about this thing that they want. Right? And you really want to use those people's own words. These are 2 examples of questions that were developed by David Grove, who was a New Zealand psychotherapist. They're called clean questions because they've been developed in a way so that there is the minimum amount of assumption that can go through in a conversation from the part of a coach or the therapist, right? And if you want to know more about this, feel free to join our workshop. It's extremely powerful work, and David was an incredible person, and unfortunately he's no longer with us, but his work is incredibly powerful exactly for this time that we're in. And then the third part, if we still have time for that.
Yes, go for it. Go for it. This is
Cool.
great.
So that is about how you learn to support people to co-create with life, right? It is about learning to let go of your own agenda when you work with a client, even more than you think you're doing right now. Let go of your agenda completely and accept that the best possible outcome for your client or for your loved one is not something that you can imagine. It might not even be something that they can imagine at this time. And that is okay, because you'll learn to trust that they have what they need to bring their desires into reality. You don't need to give it to them, right? And this is where you can help people understand that they're in constant conversation with the universe, that they're constantly co-creating with life. And again, an easy way of starting this process is by using the opening question of, and again, use this literally, and what would you like to have happen? That question is a question that invites a process of dreaming the future into being. And in soul-based coaching, that involves helping the client make an embodied expression and a neurologic map of that future way of being in the world, but also resolving any inner tensions and supporting that inner alignment that comes with that. But really, you want to start with inviting that future in and really exploring that answer that people give by using these other questions that I gave, for example. And in that way, you're not going to trample and step onto that inner flow that is coming up for your client. In the beginning, it's like a little seedling that is really precious and vulnerable. And if we're just kind of going like, oh, maybe, other clients have done this, or like, oh, maybe it's like that is going to be quieted down really, really quickly. And in that way, your client's never going to be able to bloom into their own expression, like their own version of the peony that humans get to be. And we need all of our clients to do that, and all of our loved ones, because each one of us, I really believe that we all have this inner, we all carry part of the solution inside of us. And the only way we get there is if we help each other unfold into finding those pieces and be really curious and interested about them, and knowing that it's going to surprise us all. Like every day with all my clients, I'm totally surprised by what happens. And I think that is the hallmark of a really good coaching or healing session even.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, yes, just having those questions and those kind of clean questions, as you say, to allow somebody, or to actually not to allow, I'm going to retract that, to actually consciously hold the space for somebody else to get to whatever they need to express in that moment. So powerful, because you're so right. We all do go in and we just say, like this, that, and the other. Oh, I know what you mean. And, going on and going off with our own agendas. And then also, they are skills that we can learn. And this, I think, is something that's really important for us to grasp. I believe that other people might not, but, we have been trained to ask questions in different ways. And I think that you did say this, but when you said that, I just thought, oh yes, I know people who just ask questions, and they just want the factual information as if that's important. And to me, it's like, what, you're missing the whole point of what's trying to be expressed here. And it's the same as, like, if we think about the preciousness of a small child, if we go in there and trample all of their amazingness with our own agendas, which is what happens, but it is what happens in life. But as when we're parents, for example, hopefully we try to not to. We're so curious about, okay, well, what's going to happen? Who's this person? Who is this person? What's the delight that they are bringing, or having, or not delight? What's the crabbiness that they're having? It's just such a valuable thing. And also, you know, what you were sharing, as you were sharing it, I was thinking, yes, these are probably great questions for when we're in those really difficult situations with people who we absolutely do not have the same values as, like completely just like off the wall, crazy values that some people have because they're not my values. Um, and you know, not knowing how to deal with that, and I'm just wondering, I don't know how to deal with them. I used to when I was younger, but I seem to have lost that patience that I used to have. But this is perhaps a way to engage, and to, I don't know, to honor what's inside them and not just see the outside of them that is a product of this paradigm that has been squashing us for so long.
Yeah, that's so true. And it doesn't make it easy, right? And this is why holding space is is a real practice, that we learn to be with all of the stuff that comes up, whether that is in a coaching session, or setting where it's like, oh, I want to help this person. Like, people lean in so quickly to kind of go, oh, how can I help? Or whether it's about, like you said, a conversation with someone who's like, oh, you're really not on the same page as I am. How can we find some way of connecting? Like, do I even want to? There's times when it's like, for me, openly racist people, no, not going to engage. But yes, that question of like, is there anything else about that? As long as you can ask it with a tone that is like, gently curious, what you'll find is that very, very often, it doesn't take very long until you find like a layer of their humanness that you can relate to. And it's still like, the choices they make or the conclusions that they've made of life, they might still not be your ways of thinking about life. But it's way easier to find a level of like, hey, look at that, you're human, I'm human, we can actually relate. And I think that, I think numerologically, that's like a hard word. But speaking, it's a 2-year, which is that is inviting us to look at divides and division and look at how can we bring things together. And I think this is a really very effective skill. Well, I know that it is a very effective skill, or actually a skill set, all three of them together, to really make an impact in your life, in the work that you do every day.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, I mean, we could go on talking about this for a very long time because it's such an important thing and there's so much we could explore. And I know you've already touched on the gifts that you're sharing, but would you like to just reiterate them here? And everybody, you can get them below, the links are below, but I really want to make sure that, everybody understands fully what they are.
Yeah, great. So we have the 10-minute meditation to help you in the practice of holding space for yourself. And then there is a free workshop that we run regularly. And if you sign up for our mailing list, then you'll get invited for when the next one is. That's about the 6 guiding principles for holding space. And so that really helps you to keep working that muscle. Like, there's always another layer. And then, of course, if you're interested in soul-based coaching as a modality, if you want to learn to either add some of that magic to what you're already doing as a coach or as a healer, we have an 8-week program that we run twice a year for that. And we also have a 1-year full soul-based coach certification program that is open to everyone, whether you have any experience or not. And that is going to start again in June. So if you want to know more about that, just connect with us, connect with me on social media, and we're very happy to tell you more.
Okay, wonderful opportunities there. And the links, as I said, they're all below here, with Annemiek's full bio, so you can read more about, all the juiciness and everything that she does. Annemiek, thank you so much for coming and sharing this with us and just giving us this very warm invitation to to actually move into a different space with ourselves and so with others as well. So really massive heartfelt thank you to you today.
Thank you so much, Alison. It's been a real pleasure to be here and have this conversation with you.
Yeah. And everyone, thank you for joining us today. And as always, we really do love to know, how has this touched you? Has it touched you? What's come up when you've been watching this and listening to our conversation? Have you had some aha moments, or have you had some realizations? We would love to know. So what you can do is just reply to any of the summit emails and say that it's in relation to Annemiek's interview, and anything that you pass on to me, I will pass on to her as well, so she knows too. And that way, we're keeping the energy moving, and we are together. We are wise women rising together, not separately. So let's just really hold that energy. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you again, Annemiek. It's been fantastic.